13 Encounters with Shadower People. While shadow people may often be thought of as a modern phenomenon, thanks in part to the rise of the internet, these mysterious dark entities can be traced back to ancient times. Found in our legends and folklore, these shadow beings have taken the form of shades of the underworld in ancient Greek mythology and mythic creatures in Native American legends. It seems like shadow people have always been with us. Generally described as a dark figure or black mass, they often appear as living shadows, flickering in and out of our peripheral vision. The following stories of real shadow people have been shared by people from around the world, but be warned, these stories are not for the easily spooked. If you've ever experienced the sensation of being watched when you thought you were all alone, heed these warnings and don't look into the shadows. You never know what you may find staring back at you. The screams. When my daughter was between the ages of 3 and 8, she spoke of people with no faces or figures in shadows. She would often wake me up, telling me there was a man or a figure standing in her closet. The most frightening part of the story is that she woke me up to ask me if I heard the screams. She said there was a shadow that stood at her doorway and screamed at her and then flew into my room and screamed at my wife and me. At this point, she was in uncontrollable sobs, unable to understand why I did not wake up. She is now 11 and the encounters have stopped. She refuses to speak of whatever was going on with her and makes light of my questions. Dancing shadows. My grandpa used to see shadow figures out of the corners of his eyes as a kid, while awake, and so did his little brother. He was a very no-nonsense Englishman, so one day he simply told them he wouldn't be seeing them anymore, "Thank you very much," and he never did after that. He said they didn't scare him, but they distracted him. He would see them sort of doing cartwheels, dancing jerky dances like puppets, or just walking around. When he got into grammar school, he decided he was too grown up for them, and told them to go away. His brother carried on seeing them, and as far as he knew, never stopped. The 100% did not believe in the paranormal. He was all about science. I've never heard him tell a ghost story in my life. And he told me about this when I was in my 20s, so he certainly wasn't just trying to scare the granddaughter. Maria Marevna, Surrounded. When I was younger, I had some teeth pulled, and spent the next couple of days stuck in bed. I fell asleep in the middle of the day, and I remember slowly waking up to indistinct whispering. It was like some people were talking to each other in the next room, but I couldn't make out what they were saying. When I opened my eyes, there were dozens of these tall, thin, shadowy figures in the room. Definitely humanoid, but I couldn't see any details. They were just dark, like your eyes couldn't quite focus on them if you looked right at them. They moved around the room a bit, generally paying me no mind. I was confused and curious, but not scared. Like, I knew they couldn't really do anything to me, or didn't want to. Pinion_gear, Ancient Spirits. When I was a bit younger, I went up to the forests in the mountains where I live. This one forest, in particular, used to be the location of an ancient Celtic village, and I often saw shadow figures roaming around the area there. At first, I was really spooked, but after a few months of visiting this forest, I noticed that the figures didn't pay much attention to me and some even waved at me. Planet Bomb, Nighttime Terrors. I am rarely one to make a big deal of things, let alone tell anyone weird, unbelievable stuff, but these are some experiences that I recently had in a house we lived in for a little under a year. We moved into this house in October of 2001. For the first 2 or 3 months, all was fine. Then, on or around the first of the year, 2002, my 4-year-old, then 3, would wake up in the middle of the night absolutely terrified, saying there was a monster in her room. Of course, I brushed this off as a childhood nightmare, but then in late February, I started waking up in the middle of the night with a feeling of someone staring at me. Note my daughter stopped getting up. Upon looking in the general vicinity of where this feeling was coming from, I would briefly see a shadowy black and gray apparition that would be gone as soon as my eyes focused. This would give me the chills, then I would go to sleep. This occurred 2 to 3 times a week for months. The same nightly scenario, I'd wake up focused and gone, or I'd wake up seeing it and turn on the TV, and it was gone. Only once did my fiancée actually see the apparition too. I think it was in June. She woke me up in the middle of the night and said she saw a faceless child standing next to her about 3 feet away from her side of the bed. As soon as she looked at the face, it was gone. I then got up and told her it must have been my daughter. I went into her room and she was fast asleep. Other than this, she never saw anything again. The most frightful experience with it was in late August when I woke out of a dead sleep again and did the routine, except this time it didn't disappear. It stayed floating in the corner of the room. It was a swirling black cloud with some gray in it. Probably 4 to 5 feet long and 112 to 2 feet wide. I will honestly say I have never felt that kind of fear in my life. It felt like there was pure evil in the room. I couldn't move, but I was able to nudge my fiancée and say, "Look, there it is, that thing I keep seeing." With that, she rolled over, and only after she turned over did it disappear. We moved out in late September, and I have not been woken up since. I did ask a few people about the history of this house, but to no one's recollection did anyone ever meet their fate on that ground. Like I said, normally I wouldn't take the time to write this, however, I felt as though I needed to get it off my chest. They know who you are. The thing about them is that they don't move the way people say ghosts move, sort of unaware of their surroundings. They move around like people for the most part, as if they're really interacting with the world. The 3 times I've seen what I can only call a shadow person, I've been keenly aware that they knew I saw them. That's the creepiest part, that they seem to know who you are and where they are, that they're intelligent. Anonymous. Secrets. My only experience with anything like this was after a particularly vivid dream in which someone was whispering what I can only describe as secrets into my ear. When I awoke, I looked directly across my bedroom and I saw a shadow darker than darkness. It turned and looked at me. When I called out, it turned and ran straight into the wall, and I'm sure I saw a kind of splash of darkness, like dissipating smoke, as it disappeared. I absolutely believe that whatever it was had been whispering in my ear before I woke up and that I had awakened before he thought I would. I also just felt I knew it was a he. Anonymous. I know what I saw. On Thursday 20th of August 2015, I woke up to see a shadowy figure standing by my bed. It looked about the same size and shape as a person but had no sharp edges to its form. Others have described sightings as looking like being made of dark smoke, and that's exactly what this looked like. I looked straight at it, and it immediately moved away quickly and was gone. The whole thing lasted just a few seconds, but I know what I saw. I also felt strongly that it knew I was there and reacted when I looked straight at it. I am Bundy. A bad stench. I've seen one leaning over my mother while she was sleeping. It seemed like it was very interested in her, observing her. When it saw me in the doorway, it reacted extremely fast. It sprinted towards me and passed through me at great speed. It is probably worth mentioning that it divided itself into 3 beings when it moved. Whoosh, 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 all 3 passed through me. But strangely enough, that shadow figure didn't seem very hostile to me. I think there is more than one type of shadow person. When I was a kid, I dealt with a demonic one, which, I kid you not, haunted my bedroom for a while. Every sign of a haunting was there: cold air, a sense of fright, religious objects falling down, scratches on the ceiling, and even a face appeared. I've only seen that one once before it started the haunting, and I remember it left a very bad stench behind. And it looked different. I only saw a small portion of it, but it was more material, it had more substance, like thick smoke, while the other one was more translucent, ghost-like. Dim. Don't encourage them. I've encountered a few in my life. They are demons or jinn. They are not good. I'm a sensitive empath and I feel death. I have never been approached by a good shadow person. They put on a facade to get you to let your guard down if you have one. The most frightening experience I have had was about 3 months ago. I was visiting my hometown and staying at my mother's house. I was in the back bedroom lying in bed when I turned the TV off for the night. The door was closed and the room was pitch black. I felt and heard someone in my room. I honestly thought it was my brother looking for something he might have left in my room and he didn't want to wake me, but I turned and looked towards the door and saw a tall black figure. It was so dark I could see it in the pitch black. I asked who it was with no answer. I asked what it wanted and it moved closer. I felt such fear and await. I've become desensitized to spirits, so that was odd. It wanted me to be afraid. I yelled as loud as I could, "Go away. Leave me alone." It stayed. I got up and picked up my phone and turned on the flashlight. When the light filled the room, the black figure was gone, and my door was cracked open. I grabbed my rosary that was blessed and an eagle feather and prayed till I fell asleep. I never pray. I still don't know what it wanted, but now it is masking itself as a little boy, about 7 or 8, with black hair and sad eyes. I've told him to leave, but he still peeks around corners at me. Don't encourage them. Tell them to go away. Butcher Babe 777, a family visit. I was visiting my family, and my sister and I had just turned the lights off to go to bed. I was lying on my back, and after my eyes adjusted, I looked toward the closed door and saw a shadow darker than the dark walk across the door. I clearly saw what looked like legs walking. I just closed my eyes and turned onto my side and tried to fall asleep as fast as I could. It freaked me out since it was in my old bedroom and I used to have weird stuff happen to me in there when I was in high school. I get nervous whenever I stay at my parents' house now. Shirecluse 1126, more dark than any shadow. During an investigation, all 4 of us in the room saw it. It has no sound. It moved very smoothly, not articulated. It reflected nothing and was darker than any shadow. It seemed very curious about us and kept walking by the door of the room we were in and eventually came inside. We had the lights off in the room, but it was light outside and in the hallway. Even with our infrared cameras, the window lets in enough light to see clearly. I didn't feel anything, not even scared. Snowbirdie, we coexist. I've lived with shadow people all my life, and see them every so often. The time I was 10 I woke up in the middle of the night and looked at my door, and there was a shadow person standing there in the hallway. I used to sleep with the door open, and I could clearly see the outline of it. It was static though, the outline was clear but shifted like there was interference in what I was seeing. I could tell I was being watched and looked at, but there were no facial features, just a black mass in the shape of a person. The figure darted to the left of the doorframe and entered the living room. I could hear its footsteps, oddly enough. It came back, then stopped in my doorway again before going down the hall towards my parents' room. I got up to look and, of course, nothing. I sleep with my door closed now. I never saw it again in that house. I heard it though, walking through the house many times. It wasn't until I moved into my current place that I saw them again, this time much more frequently. I see them every few weeks or so. They don't bother me, I don't bother them. We coexist. Nyril.